Hi, this is Cheryl Peterson with Healing Science Today. I'm going to read a contemporary Christian Science Bible sermon from the New International Version of the Bible, copyrighted by Biblica Incorp., and from 21st Century Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, a modern version of Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health, copyrighted by Cheryl Peterson. The subject is comfort. Golden text is from 2 Corinthians. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all troubles, so that we may comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. Genesis. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilphar, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him." Joseph had surely been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on a sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. 21st Century Science and Health. Knowledge and pleasure, evolved through physical and personal senses, produce the immediate mindset of fear and shame. Uncomfortable in the presence of truth, human knowledge becomes confused, and people cower and hide when they hear the divine voice calling for their attention. The nothingness of error, which is in proportion to its wickedness, is seen when we are conscious of truth. People who touch the fringe of Christ's garment and master their illegitimate convictions, their angers, and their fight or flight reactions will rejoice in the proof of healing, in a sweet and certain sense that God is love. It is a sad day for the person who professes to practice and be faithful to divine science, but fails to strangle the serpent of sin as well as of sickness. They are still living in their self-sabotaging comfort zones and human passions. They are in the turbulent sea of error, not struggling to lift their heads above the drowning wave. What happens when we don't fight and destroy sin? What happens when we don't destroy finite convictions or mortal status quos? Our mental and physical state will perceive suffering. The sin which you think you love or is a part of you comes back with accelerated force, for the devil knows its time is short. The scriptural reference to time reaffirms the fact that evil is temporal, not eternal. The dragon is at last stung to death by its own malice. How many periods of torture are required to remove all sin will depend on sin's stubbornness. John. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priest and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." 21st Century Science and Health. Scientific interpretation of scriptures starts with the first chapter of the Old Testament, mainly because the spiritual meaning of the word in its earliest articulations often seems smothered by the immediate context and requires explanation. The New Testament narratives, however, are clearer and nearer the heart. Jesus illumines the narratives by showing the poverty of mortal existence, but richly recompensing human want and woe with spiritual gain. The incarnation of truth, the amplification of wonder and glory, which angels could only whisper and which God illustrated by light and harmony, is consonant with ever-present love. So-called mystery and miracle serve the unfolding of good. The supernatural is explained by that love which gives rest to the weary. Love does comfort the yearning for something more than the history of perpetual evil. Jesus said, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." Jesus restored Lazarus by the understanding that Lazarus never died, not by believing his body died and lived again. Had Jesus believed that Lazarus died or lived in his body, the Master would have stood on the same plane of belief as those who buried the body, and he could not have resuscitated it. It is a mistake to assume we started materially, or that non-intelligence becomes intelligence, or that mind and soul are right and wrong simultaneously. Hope is ever prophesying thus. The human mind will sometime ascend above all limited, incomplete physical sense, exchanging it for spiritual perceptions and divine consciousness. Then we will recognize our God-given dominion and being. 2 Corinthians. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us, as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. 21st Century Science and Health. Song, sermon, and science, crumbs of comfort, are capable to inspire us with wisdom, truth, and love. Spiritual comfort blesses the human family, feeds the unsatisfied, and gives living water to the thirsty. It is most beneficial to become more familiar with good than with evil. We can guard against false beliefs as diligently as we bolt our doors against the approach of thieves and murderers. We should love our enemies and help them on the basis of the golden rule, do to others which you would have them do to you. Avoid throwing your pearls to pigs, because if you do, everyone loses out. If human beings would properly guard against human mind, the brood of evils which infest it would be cleared out. We must begin with the human mind and empty it of its negativity and self-delusion, or negativity and self-delusion will never cease. The conventional human systems disappoint the weary searcher who is searching for a divine theology, a theology adequate to teach above human theology. The nature of spirituality is peaceful and blessed. To enter the realm of spirit, our anchor of hope must be thrown past the veil of matter into the Shekinah that Jesus showed us. This advance beyond superficial thinking comes through the joys and triumphs of the righteous, as well as through their sorrows and afflictions. We must leave mortal impressions of fleshly being and advance into immortal impressions of spiritual being. The God-inspired walk calmly on, though with aching feet. Pampered hypocrites may ride on easy street here, but they can't forever break the golden rule and escape the penalty due. We reap what we sow. Praise to God and peace to the struggling hearts. Christ has removed the obstacle from the door of human hope and faith, and through the revelation and demonstration of life in God, we are elevated to possible at-one-ment with the spiritual idea of God and our divine principle, love.